am560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Jim Carafano writing in at foxnews.com. Mentioned this piece earlier in the week talking about Trump's foreign policy. Trump's critics are blindly obsessed with hating Trump. They've never allowed themselves to seriously consider the alternative, that his statecraft is sound. In fairness, Trump makes matters easy for them. His over-the-top rhetoric leaves the foreign policy class distraught and distracted, like the guy who shops at Brooks Brothers wearing Crocs and parachute pants. Yes, the kind of imagery you get from...
Oh, I got it. You had parachute pants.
A West Point grad and the VP of the Catherine Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. A man known for a rhetorical flourish or two his own self. Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano joins us now. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we have a good example of that in this recent Iran dust-up. Yesterday we had an intelligence briefing on the Hill, so the members of two different political parties represented that came out of the Congress come out of the briefing and give completely different spins on the intelligence briefing.
Well,
how
what
is
did
that
they
possible?
say? Well, what did they both say?
It's the Rashomon effect, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, on the one side, they said, well, which is actually, I think I've been fairly able to confirm through independent sources that there was a legitimate threat. And the U.S. actually went to the Iranians before they sent the fleet in, and they sent back channel warnings to just kind of back off, dude. And the recent malicious activity in the region, which included attacking some tankers and sabotaging some pipelines, was directly traced back to the Iranian government. So that and then the other guys came out and said, "Oh, well, we think this is all just manufactured. The administration's overreacting. They want a war with Iran." Look, both sides can't be right. I mean, so how could two people come out of intelligence briefing and say completely different things if people aren't playing politics of what they're hearing?
Yeah.
Only in Washington. Well, which side do you believe?
Well, like I said, I feel pretty confident from talking to our people that there was a legitimate threat, and the United States did try to wave them off. I also feel pretty confident that this isn't going anywhere, that the Iranians got the message, and that if you listen very carefully, both rhetorically to what the Iranians are saying and what people are saying they're seeing on the ground, that neither side's looking for a major conflict here.
Yeah, it's like the guy that talks the most is the guy that wants to fight the least, right? I'm going to knock you into next week. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Well, he really doesn't want to throw a punch.
Well, President Trump did that, though. I mean, he tweeted out, if Iran wants to fight, that will be the official end.
Right, and they were both just kind of chest bumping. I think what reflects on a larger scale is the administration's strategy is actually working. Iran is under a great deal of pressure. And, we don't know exactly what they're thinking because all we have is kind of their public rhetoric, and I don't get classified intelligence, but I think what we generally see is what the Iranian preferred strategy is just wait Trump out. Sit on their hands, hope that somebody else gets elected, right? But look, what we see is what they're actually doing is rather than just kind of just suffering for another year and a half, they would like to meddle enough to kind of demonstrate to the region that they're tough guys. Also, hopefully, maybe they could do enough instigation that it would convince people to criticize Trump more. Maybe he increase the chances he doesn't get elected. So enough meddling to kind of let people know they're there, but not enough meddling to escalate into a major conflict.
Well, that region includes the Western Hemisphere because of the Iranians' involvement in Venezuela propping up Maduro. And I wonder if President Trump is making any back-off dude overture to the Iranians with respect to Caracas.
Well, I think they do provide some logistical support, but the big crux of the support, the external support for the Venezuelans, is primarily from the Cubans and the Russians, and also money from the Chinese.
But I mean,
and some technical help from the Chinese.
give us your assessment of the approach that the Trump administration is taking to Maduro's regime and trying to help engineer regime change there, and then those actors that are backing him.
Well, I think nobody was really prepared for May Day, neither Maduro or Guaido. Maduro, I think, was correctly reported that under pressure from the United States, he was prepared to flee the country, and the Russians convinced him to stay. We think that's true. And then what Maduro said, because he was really worried about the May Day protests, was they would just try to arrest Guaido and end this thing once and for all. And Guaido found out about that and instead kind of asked for the military to kind of overthrow the regime. I think we all assumed that was going to end one way or another, that the government would either just then go ahead and really crack down and Guaido would flee the country and try to continue in exile, or that the military would flip and Maduro would leave the country. And I think really kind of surprising everybody, because nobody went into this as kind of planning as this is the end game. In the end, what Maduro did was kind of blink. He stayed, but he didn't initiate the kind of, let's end it one for all crackdown. And we've kind of gone back to the status quo of where there is an active opposition in the country by Guaido, who by most countries recognize as a legitimate president, and Maduro. So the kind of back and forth standoff from them continues. I think in the long term it doesn't play well for Maduro, because the economy is continuing isolated, he's continually strained, and we do kind of continue to see a drip of defections from Maduro. So I'm not sure how long this is sustainable, but we've kind of gone from a crisis into back where we were. But again, another example of where everybody said, "Oh, Trump is a crazy guy. Trump's going to invade Venezuela. He's going to do something." And of course, he didn't do any of those things.
Yeah, I mean, the Dr. Strangelove routine from the left gets a little tiresome. But let me go to what you wrote. This idea about Trump's polish, his style, versus the quality of his statecraft. How important is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in this? I thought he gave an excellent talk, of course underreported, at the Claremont Institute last week, in which he essentially said, look, here's what's happened the last 30 years. The last 30 years, Republican and Democrat regimes have taken the approach post-Cold War that what's good for the world is good for America. What America First means, what our administration is doing, is saying what's good for America and and consistent with our foundational values is good for the world, and turning that approach on its head, the approach of the last 30 years on its head, has arguably led to the sound statecraft that you're describing, no?
I wish more people would go back and read the Claremont Institute speech that Pompeo gave. I think it's seminal. What he does is really kind of explain Trump in terms that the Washington bubble talks in and would understand, and I think better than Trump himself could kind of explain. I think it's a very important speech, and I think what's important about it is it's not just a speech, because it's a speech after the president's been on the ground for 2 years and done this, right? And he's just explaining what the guy's actually doing. So it's not like some campaign speech or something, or we're going to do this. This is what they've done, and he's explaining why they've done it. And to me, it's incredibly frustrating. I experienced this just yesterday in a briefing I was doing for people, that you go in and you say, look, you don't like Trump, I get that. You hate Trump, I get that, and everything else. But if you actually look at his policies, they make sense and they're coherent, right? And then you go into these things and people say, oh, he's just delivering on campaign promises, or he's just tactical, or he's impatient, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just an amateur, they're just going from one thing. None of which is true. Okay, I get it. Maybe you don't like him. I get that. Maybe you don't even like our policies. I get that. But to say that they're not coherent, and that there isn't a guiding lifeline of an idea here, and that they're actually not having impact on the world stage, that just defies the reality of what's going on in the world.
And, you wrote in your article, too, that a coward would have dodged that meeting between him and the president of Hungary.
Yeah, I thought that was another really, really good example. I mean, people attacked him for meeting with the president of Hungary. So here's a duly elected president of a country in NATO, and the president should not meet with him? So, I mean, this is kind of Putin's daydream. Yes, let's start not treating everybody in NATO the same, and let's start, creating opportunities to fracture the alliance. I mean, that's what Putin would love. I mean, the Europeans would love if Trump would demonize these guys, but whether you like Orban or not, I mean, I really don't care. The point is he's an ally. Why would the president not meet with him? And I just thought that was just a great example. But again, a good example where the president is much more concerned about getting the job done than he is about whether the Washington bubble likes him. Because if he really wanted the Washington bubble to like him, he could have just not had the meeting with Orban. And what was Hungary going to do? They're going to pull out of NATO? I don't think so. So I think sometimes we're so wrapped up in the Trump in our head that we don't pay any attention to the Trump that's actually in the White House.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Here's something else that's going on the world over, continues to go on, and it's worth remarking upon. The election in Australia, another win for conservative populism. Now, I don't like all the forms that it takes in every country that has moved in that direction, but it is worth noting that the big government deindustrialize the industrialized nation of America, of Australia, because that was a big issue in that election, as well as sort of the open borders, Angela Merkel approach to government and assimilation of people coming into your country or lack thereof. That's being rejected. It continues to be rejected 2 years plus into Trump's administration.
I think there's a couple of big takeaways from the Australia election. I think foreign policy has been largely the same, whoever won, and that's largely pro-American. But one is definitely a rejection of the whole climate change narrative, that we have to castrate Australia in order to deal with climate change. People just rejected that. There was, we would much rather have a free market economy than a government managed economy. That was two. And I think the third one is, you're exactly right, that the idea of patriotic assimilation, that people that come here should become Australian, just like people that come to America should become American. That there was an embracing of that idea, and the nation getting to decide who comes there and who gets to be an Australian. So I thought those were three pretty powerful themes from Australian voters that people did not expect. I mean, this was like a Trumpian win in Australia. Everybody expected the Labor to win, and the Liberal, which is the more conservative party, actually won.
He is Colonel Jim Carafano, U.S. Army vet, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of books including Surviving the End and Wiki at War. And check out his piece, which I tweeted out, foxnews.com or at Dan Proft on Twitter. Trump style lacks polish, but his statecraft is sound. It's a good piece. Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, great being on your show. I love your show. You guys are awesome.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Oh, see?
See?
Very nice.
We didn't even ask him what color parachute pants he's wearing with his Crocs. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer.